Welcome to our channel where we delve into the darkest corners of reality, friends. Tonight, we're diving deep into the unsettling world of neighborly horror. These aren't your average spooky stories, these are real accounts of terror that hit close to home, literally. Today, we bring you 3 disturbing, true neighbor horror stories that will make you question how well you really know the people living next door. Turn off the lights, sit back, and prepare to be terrified. Our story takes us to a quiet suburban street where manicured lawns and friendly smiles were the norm. This is where Emily lived, a young woman who had just moved into her dream home. She was greeted by her next-door neighbor, a seemingly kind older man named Mr. Smith. He had a warm smile and crinkled eyes when he laughed. Mr. Smith was the epitome of a good neighbor, always willing to lend a helping hand. He'd often invite her over for tea and cookies, sharing stories of his late wife and his days as a carpenter. One afternoon, while having tea, Emily noticed a strange stain on the armrest of his favorite chair. It was a deep, rusty brown, and it looked odd. Days turned into weeks, and the stain continued to bother Emily. One day, while Mr. Smith was away, Emily decided to satisfy her curiosity. She used the spare key he'd given her and entered his house. The living room was shrouded in shadows, casting eerie fingers across the floor. Emily's breath caught as she saw the stained armchair again. She cautiously approached the chair, her hand trembling as she touched the stain. Just then, a soft thud from upstairs broke the silence. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. She froze, every muscle tense. Taking a deep breath, she made her way towards the stairs. As she reached the top, a metallic smell sent a wave of nausea through her. It was the smell of blood. Her eyes widened in fear as she crept down the hallway. The smell grew stronger as she approached a closed door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. What she saw would forever be burned into her nightmares. In the center of the room, a tarp lay spread out, and on it a human shape lay still. Blood had pooled around the figure, staining the tarp crimson. Emily stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. On a small table, she saw an array of tools, meticulously cleaned and arranged. She was standing in Mr. Smith's kill room. As Emily stood there, paralyzed with fear, she heard a noise behind her. Turning slowly, her blood ran cold. Mr. Smith stood in the doorway, his face contorted in rage and surprise, holding a bloodied hammer. "Emily, dear," he said, chillingly calm, "I'm so glad you could join me." Emily's scream died in her throat as Mr. Smith advanced, the hammer raised high. From that day forward, the house on that quiet suburban street stood silent, a chilling reminder of the friendly neighbor who harbored a deadly secret. Our next story takes us to a bustling apartment complex, where privacy was a luxury and the lives of strangers intersected in the most unsettling ways. This is where Sarah, a young artist, found herself living next door to a man named Walter. Walter was a recluse, rarely seen leaving his apartment. His only interactions with the outside world seemed to be through the peephole in his door. At first, Sarah didn't think much of Walter. She was busy with her art, her days filled with color palettes and brushstrokes. She'd catch glimpses of him occasionally, a shadowy figure lurking in the hallway, his eyes always fixed on her. His gaze made her uncomfortable, but she brushed it off as just his way. However, Sarah's initial discomfort soon blossomed into full-blown fear as Walter's behavior became increasingly erratic. It started with small things like finding handwritten notes slipped under her door. At first they were innocuous, just friendly greetings and well wishes, but the notes grew more frequent, the handwriting more frantic, the messages more possessive. "Your smile brightens my day," one note read, while another simply said, "You belong to me." Sarah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, her sense of security shattered. Walter's obsession with Sarah intensified with each passing day. He began leaving her gifts outside her door, a single red rose, a box of chocolates with one missing, a framed photograph of her taken from afar. Each gift was a chilling reminder of Walter's growing obsession, his presence lurking just beyond her door. Fear constricted Sarah's life, her once vibrant world now painted in shades of anxiety and dread. Desperate for help, Sarah confided in the building's superintendent, a burly man who had seen it all in his years of managing the complex. He listened patiently to Sarah's story, his face etched with concern. "Don't worry, Sarah," he said, his voice gruff but reassuring. "I'll talk to Walter. This nonsense has to stop." The superintendent confronted Walter, warning him to stay away from Sarah. Walter, his eyes filled with a chilling intensity, simply nodded, a sinister smile playing on his lips. The superintendent's warning, however, only seemed to fuel Walter's obsession. He became bolder, his actions escalating from unsettling to downright terrifying. One night, Sarah awoke to a scratching sound at her window. Her heart pounded in her chest as she slowly crept towards the window, her breath catching in her throat. Peeking through the blinds, she saw him, Walter, perched precariously on the fire escape, his eyes burning into her soul. Terror gripped Sarah's heart, her screams echoing into the night. She raced to her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed 911. The police arrived to find Walter gone, vanished into the night. A thorough search of his apartment revealed a chilling shrine dedicated to Sarah, her pictures plastered on the walls, her discarded objects arranged like sacred relics. Our final story leads us to a close-knit cul-de-sac, where neighbors knew each other by name and children played freely in the streets. It was the kind of place where everyone felt safe and secure, a place where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. That is, until the day Mrs. Henderson, a kind, elderly woman who always had a smile on her face and a plate of freshly baked cookies ready, vanished without a trace. At first, no one suspected anything out of the ordinary. Mrs. Henderson was known to go on spontaneous trips to visit her sister in the next town, but as days turned into weeks and the cookies in Mrs. Henderson's cookie jar remained untouched, a growing sense of unease settled over the cul-de-sac. The neighbors, their concern growing with each passing day, started knocking on Mrs. Henderson's door, hoping for any sign of her. But the only answer they received was an eerie silence, a silence that spoke volumes in the quiet neighborhood. The neighbors, their concern now morphing into full-blown panic, decided to contact the police. The police, initially skeptical of foul play, began their investigation by questioning the neighbors, hoping to piece together Mrs. Henderson's last known whereabouts. But the neighbors, despite their best efforts, couldn't provide any concrete leads. Mrs. Henderson was a creature of habit, her days filled with tending to her garden, baking cookies and chatting with neighbors over the fence. Her disappearance was a baffling mystery, with no apparent motive and no sign of forced entry into her home. As the police delved deeper into the investigation, they discovered something strange. Mrs. Henderson's house, despite her absence, showed signs of recent activity. The garden was watered, the lawn was mowed, and the mail was collected daily. It was as if Mrs. Henderson had never left, yet she was nowhere to be found. The police, baffled by this new development, expanded their search, combing through Mrs. Henderson's house for any clues that might lead them to her whereabouts. Inside, they found her belongings untouched, her furniture covered in dust sheets as if she had prepared for a long absence. But it was in the basement, a dark and musty space filled with forgotten memories and cobwebs, that the police made a chilling discovery. There, hidden beneath a pile of old boxes and furniture, was a trapdoor leading to a hidden room, a room that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned detectives. The room was small and cramped, its walls lined with shelves stacked high with jars. But these were not jars filled with preserves or jams. These jars contained something far more sinister, something that made the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Each jar held a human heart, preserved in a murky liquid, a macabre collection that spoke of a darkness that lurked beneath the surface of their peaceful cul-de-sac. As the police processed the gruesome scene, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something truly evil, something that defied all logic and reason. The hearts, upon further investigation, were identified as belonging to several missing persons from the surrounding areas, their cases dating back years. The cul-de-sac, once a symbol of safety and community, was now shrouded in fear and suspicion. The neighbors, their faces etched with horror and disbelief, struggled to comprehend the darkness that had taken root in their midst. Mrs. Henderson was never found, her fate a chilling mystery that continued to haunt the cul-de-sac. The trapdoor in her basement, a portal to a nightmare, served as a constant reminder that even in the most idyllic of places, evil can lurk just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more chilling tales. Remember, these are just a few of the countless stories that demonstrate the thin veil between normalcy and nightmare, especially when it comes to the people we live closest to. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones living right next door. Sweet dreams.